Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be my full review of this knife, and this is the Vosteed Thunderbird. And so this is one of the earlier designs from Vosteed. It's been around for a little while now, and it's one of the higher end designs from Vosteed. They have moved into, some really fancy knives. They just released a knife with a new locking mechanism via Kickstarter. So it was funded, immediately much more than they, needed. So that's great. And it's really cool to see them doing new designs like that. But this is one of their kind of mainstays. And so they asked if I would be interested in reviewing it. And I said, definitely. It's got some cool features. So first of all, this knife has several different opening methods. So one of them is the classic back flipper. Another is the front flipper. And then you've got this kind of hole here, which you can go with your thumb or with your middle finger. And then you also have the button lock, which allows you to swing it out. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opening methods. So you've got a lot of different options there. And then it also has this really cool compound kind of modified Tonto grind. So you've got the hollow grind here, and then a flat grind with the kind of transition, which is always cool looking. Hopefully you can see that well there. And the kind of curved edge towards the tip. So a kind of cool blade shape, almost towards a harpoon version of a modified Tonto with this kind of really amplified blade thumb ramp. So, you can get your thumb on there, but it also gives it that kind of harpoon look. And then the blade also has this big, I don't know what you might call a fuller, which gives it kind of a unique look also. Then this particular version has these really cool G10 handles. I think that this type of handle, I don't know if it's like literally the brand G10, but I think that they're really, really cool and look really unique. So I was happy to, get this version. There are other versions also, but I was, definitely excited to get this version with the really cool red and black swirls to it. It's also got some machining on the handle, as you can see, that kind of goes along with this fuller. So it's got a little bit of a futuristic look to it, in my opinion. And it's definitely well built. So you can see very drop closed. In fact, it kind of hits the bottom and bounces up sometimes. So very, very drop close smooth. I have not adjusted it. This is how it came to me from Vosteed. Nice and smooth on that. Easy to open for sure. And nicely centered also. When you open it, no blade plays side to side even when unlocked, and it locks up solid. Now, one button lock knife that I had from Vosteed, the Raccoon, did have did fail a spine whack test. This passes it. I've spine whacked it harder than that too, and I know that some people say that you shouldn't do that. It's not realistic. That won't happen when you're using a knife, and I agree. That shouldn't happen while you're using a knife, but it's just a test that I think is kind of a standard test in the industry, and so I'm happy to see that this knife passes that. Another thing I've seen is people have talked about the button cover coming off on some Vosteed knives, and I didn't have that at all. I've opened and closed this a lot, just kind of fidgeting with it, and haven't noticed that button lock cover coming loose. It's something that I think that they did change something to fix. I really couldn't find the post that I was thinking of that I remember seeing, but I do think that they changed something with that, and I have not had any issues with it. As for the opening, I found myself pretty much exclusively using the back flipper. It works really, really nicely. It's very easy to use. It's almost like an inline flipper with how it's above the handle rather than out from the side. You can see it's above the lock rather than out here, and I find inline flippers to work really well. I like them a lot, and so I use that almost exclusively. For me, this front flipper is just a little awkward. I don't know if it's because it's pretty high, or if it's because it's rounded here instead of going kind of more straight up and having a more hard turn. I don't know if it's because, you know, you're supposed to use it more like a top flipper, which I am not as dexterous with, but I didn't find myself using the front flipper a whole lot. And it's somewhat difficult for me to get my thumb into the thumb hole. So unless I was doing it with purpose, you know, doing it to purposefully try it out, I didn't really use that, or the middle finger flick. It sits pretty down in there. So I didn't find myself using that a lot. I pretty much exclusively use the back flipper, but the back flipper works well. Now, as for the cutting of this knife, it's not, I don't think, the most thinly ground knife out there, but that's something you can expect, being that it's not a super tall grind. So it's, you know, it doesn't go all the way up towards the spine. But it cut well enough. I use this, you know, in some normal daily tasks, a little bit of food prep, a little bit of opening boxes, I think a little bit using it to help build a chicken coop, and it worked, you know, fine for those tasks. Again, not the thinnest ground knife, you know, compared to maybe like a full flat ground Civivi knife or something along those lines, but certainly a cool looking grind and will work pretty much the way you need it to for most EDC tasks. Now, this blade is in S35VN, so it's a great steel. It's a steel that I'm very familiar with, I've used a lot, and I think is a great option. It's easy enough to sharpen, holds an edge really well, pretty stainless. I think a great steel and a good choice on this knife. And speaking of which, this is a pretty good size knife. You know, for a long time I said I preferred knives in the 3.5 to 4 inch blade length range. I think now I'm probably more so 3.25 to 3.75 inch blade length range, but you can see here compared to a Spyderco Military 2, the Thunderbird is certainly smaller, but it's not a tiny knife. Here it is compared to a Benchmade full-size Griptilian. You can see that it's about the same size, maybe slightly larger, and here it is compared to a classic Ontario Rat 1. You can see that the Thunderbird is maybe a little smaller than the Rat 1, but in the same kind of size range. So it's definitely a good size knife. It's not, you know, not a tiny knife, but also not a massive knife like the Cold Steel 4 Max Scout. You can see, hopefully, that the 4 Max Scout dwarfs the Thunderbird. So, you know, it's a big knife, but not a ridiculously big knife. So I think it'll be a good size for a lot of people, especially if you do want a larger EDC knife. I have certainly enjoyed getting to check out the Vosteed Thunderbird. I'm going to give you a couple size comparisons to some other Vosteed knives. Here is the Vosteed Nightshade, really the knife that got me interested in Vosteed, and the Vosteed Mini Labrador. So you can see that the Thunderbird is bigger than, or longer at least, than both of those. So it's, you know, on the larger side for Vosteed knives. So I have enjoyed getting to check this knife out. I think it's an interesting design. It's got some kind of unique features, and it's an interesting knife for sure. So I want to thank Vosteed for sending this knife along for review. If you're interested in getting this knife, make sure you use the link in my description. That helps the channel and shows Vosteed that you know, follow along with Knife Thoughts. And speaking of which, make sure you go to my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics, and subscribe to the email there. That way you see when I do post those new articles and such. I'm going to try to move away from social media and more towards using my own site. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, leave any comments below, and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell and select all so you know when I post those new videos. If I already said that, then, you know, just a second reminder. But as always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to go out and do good.